The question is that an honourable address be presented to Her Majesty as follows. Most gracious Sovereign, we, Your Majesty's most dutiful and loyal subjects, the Commons of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, in Parliament assembled, beg leave to offer our humble thanks to Your Majesty for the gracious speech which was addressed to both Houses of Parliament. I now call the Right Honourable Keir Starmer, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I turn to the address, I want to thank His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, for delivering the address this morning. And I too want to pay tribute to Her Majesty in the year of her Platinum Jubilee. Her dedication to Britain has been a reassuring constant in an ever-changing world. Her commitment to public duty, a reminder of the responsibilities we all owe each other. Her dignity and her leadership, an inspiration to all of us. She will forever have all of our thanks for 70 years of service to our country. We all wish her well. I also want to congratulate the Prime Minister. He's achieved a new first. The first resident of Downing Street to be a constituent of a Labour council. I'm sure they will serve him well. And I want to congratulate, Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the mover and the seconder on their fine and funny speeches. I understand that the member for Beverley and Holderness owns over 900 copies of Eagle comic books. He's no old duffer. He is an extensive collector of the adventures of Dan Dare from the Interplanet Patrol, a comic book with a hero with a moral message, a spirit that he's channeled into his 17 years in this House.
That's how you do it.
Although there is some mischief in him, as he's just demonstrated in his speech. I particularly liked his advice that you should make an enemy of your party leader. So I think he's a little bit more Dennis the Menace, myself. The member for Brecon and Radnorshire is dedicated not only to, obviously, a punishing consultation exercise on what to put in the speech for today, but also a punishing exercise regime. A former cox with Twickenham Rowing Club, a half-marathon runner, and even an Ironman competitor. Maybe she's an Iron Lady in the making. And I know that if they were here, David Amis and James Brokenshire would have been proud of both the mover and the seconder. We all miss them both. And I know the pain on the Conservative benches is still raw. Their friends taken too soon. But their passing leaves us united in our resolve to defeat the evils of both extremism and cancer. I also want to pay tribute to my dear friend Jack Dromey. Jack picked fights on behalf of working people, and he won them. In 1975, he led the first Equal Pay Act strike. He campaigned for the rights of cleaners everywhere, from the House of Commons to MI5. And in the last year of his life, he campaigned for a public inquiry on behalf of the families bereaved by COVID. The only way that we on these benches can really pay tribute to Jack is to aspire to champion working people as well as he did. Because, Mr. Speaker, times are hard, but they're much tougher than they should be. As we emerge from the pandemic, find a new place in the world outside the European Union and transition to a carbon-neutral economy, our country faces great challenges. But at the same time, great opportunities are within our reach. We can rebuild stronger, learning where our society and our services need more resilience. We can do more than just get Brexit done. We can ensure Britain is in the best position to thrive outside of the European Union. And we can lead the world in zero-carbon industries, generating high-skilled, high-wage jobs across the country. But, Mr. Speaker, for that to happen, we need a government of the moment, with the ideas that meet the aspirations of the British public. This thin address, bereft of ideas or purpose, without a guiding principle or a roadmap for delivery, shows just how far this government is from that. Too out of touch to meet the challenges of the moment, too tired to grasp the opportunities of the future. Their time has passed. Mr. Speaker, the first great challenge our country faces is the cost of living crisis. Inflation stands at 7% and rising. Household bills have gone up by hundreds of pounds. The cost of the weekly shop has rocketed, and people are seeing their wages run out much earlier in the month and the value of their savings fall. I wish I could say that the worst is over. But last Thursday, the Bank of England revised down Britain's growth and revised up inflation. This government's failure to grow the economy over a decade, combined with its inertia in the face of spiralling bills, means that we are staring down the barrel of something we haven't seen in decades, a stagflation crisis. It is a truly shocking legacy of this government. It should humble those on the benches opposite who've ignored the red lights on our economy, even whilst wages were frozen for over a decade, and whose complacency is best summed up by a Prime Minister whose response to the crisis was to make fun of those that were worrying about inflation. A government of the moment would use the great powers that it has to tackle this head-on. Bring forward an emergency budget with a windfall tax for oil and gas producers, which would raise billions. The money that could be used to slash the cost of energy bills and help businesses keep their costs down. Even the bosses at BP don't agree when the Prime Minister says it would deter investment. It's a common-sense solution. But instead, the government is bereft of leadership. The Chancellor ruling the windfall tax in, the Business Secretary ruling it out, and a Prime Minister who doesn't know what he thinks. And it's not just about the short-term measures. A government of the moment would take a step back from the crisis and ensure that Britain is never again so vulnerable to a surge in international prices, forced to go cap in hand from dictator to dictator, looking for a quick fix of imported oil. That means standing up to those vested interests who oppose onshore wind, the cheapest and most reliable source of electricity that we have. But this Prime Minister is too weak to stand up to his backbenchers. And it means investing in the insulation we need to use less energy in our homes. That would take £400 off energy bills every year and cut gas imports by 15%. But this Prime Minister is far too concerned with vanity projects ever to prioritise investment in insulating homes. So we're left with an energy bill not up to the moment. It's the latest chapter in a pathetic response to the cost of living crisis. Where there should have been support, it's been tax rise after tax rise on working people. The only country in the G7 to do so during a cost of living crisis. The low growth that led to the stagnation we see today is the same reason wages have been frozen for so long. Over 12 years of Tory government, the economy has grown far slower than when Labour was in power, and it's set to go even slower in coming years. The slowest growing economy in the G7 next year. As the Director General of the CBI said, for a country that's used to growth of 2 to 2.5%, the Conservative record is simply not good enough. Mr. Speaker, we can't afford to go on like this. If the Tories had simply matched Labour's record on growth in government, people would have had higher incomes, boosting public finances, and we could have spent £40 billion more on public services without having to raise a single tax. So the second great challenge our country faces is to get Britain growing again. A government of the moment would have grasped the nettle and set out a new approach to the economy, an approach based on a stronger partnership between government and businesses, a partnership dedicated to growth. There would have been an industrial strategy to grow the industries of the future, with the government providing initial investment that brings confidence and security and acts as a catalyst for the private sector to invest in gigafactories, hydrogen and steel. High productivity jobs right here in Britain. A government at the moment would finally abolish business rates and replace them with a fair system that creates a level playing field with online giants so that our businesses can compete, invest and grow. And a government of the moment would have a plan to revive our town centres and new businesses, providing finance for a new generation of start-ups in our town centres, giving councils the power to take over empty shops and fill the space with workshops and offices in the jobs of the future. Instead of that new approach to the economy, we have a Chancellor who thinks it would be silly to do anything different. A Chancellor who, rather than partnering with business, has loaded them up with debt and wonders why they're struggling to invest. A Chancellor who seems content to have the slowest growth of any G20 country, bar one, Russia. A Chancellor whose legacy will be low growth, high inflation and high tax, and with it the diminishing of Britain's living standards. No hope of taking on the big challenges, no hope of seizing the great opportunities. Hopeless. And because they're not up to the challenge of growing the economy, all those tax hikes aren't going into improving public services. No chance of a doctor's appointment. People forced to wait months for urgent mental health treatment. Supersized classrooms the norm again. Never before have people been asked to pay so much for so little. And, Mr. Speaker, the third great challenge we face is ending the poverty of ambition this government has for our public services. That means a government of the moment relentlessly focused on school improvement. Labour would improve leadership and teaching standards at state schools, funding it by ending tax breaks for private schools. It means a government of the moment that would finally deliver world-class mental health provision that matches years of empty rhetoric on parity with physical health. Labour would hire new clinicians so we can guarantee mental health treatment in 4 weeks, paid for by closing loopholes to private equity firms. Instead, we have a government that went into the pandemic with record waiting lists and has got no plan to get them down any time soon. A government that takes the public for fools by pretending that refurbishing a hospital, a wing of a hospital, is the same as building a new hospital. A government that can't hire the GPs it promised or the GPs we have to see more patients. Lost in spin, no ambition, not up to the challenge of the moment. And it's not just education and health that needs reform. Fraud has become commonplace. 7 million incidents a year. Britain routinely ripped off. But the business sector has suggested it doesn't even count as crime. The fraud is just the tip of the iceberg. Victims are being let down whilst this government lets violent criminals off. The overall charge rate stands at a pathetic 5.8%, meaning that huge swathes of serious offences like rape, knife crime and theft have effectively been decriminalised. A government of the moment would say enough is enough. Invest in community policing. Pulling resources, nobody can be proud of this record of 12 years. Invest in community policing. Pulling resources away from vanity projects like his ministerial yacht. It would strengthen protection for victims of crime and antisocial behaviour and increase the number of specialist rape units in the justice system so that it stops routinely failing women. Instead, we have a government that talks tough whilst letting the justice system fall apart.
Exactly.
No care for victims or their communities, not good enough, not up to the moment. We have a government whose time has passed, a cabinet out of ideas and out of energy, led by a Prime Minister who's entirely out of touch. Mr. Speaker, it doesn't have to be this way. It won't always be this way. A Labour government would tackle the cost of living crisis head on. Get Britain growing again after 12 years of failure. Improve public services so they deliver for people paying for them. A Labour government would rise to the moment where this government has badly failed. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to join you and members across this House in thanking His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, for delivering the gracious speech, and in sending our warmest wishes to Her Majesty the Queen. The whole House knows the reluctance with which Her Majesty made today's decision, and her extraordinary service to this nation continues to inspire us all. Mr. Speaker, as we come to the halfway point of this Parliament, this country has seen off the biggest challenge any post-war government has faced, but the cost of the pandemic has been huge, with the biggest fall in output for 300 years, the necessitated government expenditure of £400 billion. And the aftershocks are still being felt across the world, with a global spike in energy prices, the impact we're seeing on the cost of food. And it's precisely because this government got the big calls right and made the tough decisions during the pandemic that we had the fastest economic growth in the G7 last year, and will return to that status, by the way, by 2024, Mr. Speaker, and therefore have the fiscal firepower to help families up and down the country with all the pressures they face now. And we will continue to use all our ingenuity and compassion for as long as it takes. And my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, and I will be saying more about this in the days to come. But at the same time as we help people, we need the legislative firepower to fix the underlying problems in energy supply, in housing, in infrastructure and in skills, which are driving up costs for families across the country. And this Queen's speech takes those issues head on. And above all, we're tackling the economic challenges with the best solution of all, and that's an ever-growing number of high-wage, high-skill jobs, Mr. Speaker. Jobs, jobs, jobs. And we drive up employment by creating the right platform for business to invest. Making our streets safer, 20,000 more police, creating a healthier population, 50,000 more nurses, funding the NHS to help them clear the COVID backlogs, and giving the confidence that people know that they will be looked after in old age by fixing social care, delivering gigabit broadband, giving the remotest parts of the country the access that they need, and using our Brexit freedoms to enable revolutionary technologies like gene editing to help our farmers grow more nutritious and more productive crops. And it's that combination of public and private sector together that is tackling unemployment, with 500,000 people more on the payroll now than before the pandemic began. And it is that strength at home that enables this country to show leadership abroad, as we have done and will continue to do in supporting the people of Ukraine. So this Queen's speech delivers on our promises. It will not only take us through the aftershocks of COVID, but build the foundations for decades of prosperity, uniting and levelling up across the country. Mr. Speaker, allow me to join the Leader of the Opposition in paying tribute to those colleagues we've lost in this parliamentary session. And time will not dim our shock at the despicable murder of Sir David Amess, a friend to so many, who lost his life giving the service he loved most, a constituency surgery in a local church. And among the many legacies of Sir David, which include his amazing work on animal welfare, his campaign to support women with endometriosis, I'm proud to say that today Southend-on-Sea stands as a city in his tribute. Yesterday we gathered at St Margaret's Church to remember James Brokenshire, a true gentleman who faced his battle with cancer with enormous courage, generosity and strength of character. It was typical of our dear friend that even in the midst of his own battle, he was supporting and encouraging others to seek help, campaigning for better lung cancer screening and becoming the first MP to secure a debate on the issue on the floor of this House. We willed him to pull through because the world needs more people in public life like him. His loss is felt deeply on all sides of this House and by all those whose lives he touched. Finally, we began the year by joining the Right Honourable Member for Camberwell and Peckham in paying tribute to her wonderful husband, Jack Dromey, one of the great trade unionists of our time, who, having married someone who would go on to become, in his words, the outstanding parliamentary feminist of her generation, will also be forever remembered, in his words, as Mr. Harriet Harman, née Dromey. We all knew him as a man of great warmth, energy and compassion, and he commanded the utmost respect across this House. Mr. Speaker, the gracious speech was magnificently proposed. Self-deprecating, I thought, by my honourable friend, the member for Beverley and Holderness, whose campaigning brilliance I have seen at first hand, as he pointed out, when as backbenchers almost 20 years ago, he and I organised a demonstration against Labour's plan to close community hospitals. It was called Chant, Community Hospitals Acting Nationally Together. And his memory of it is much more glorious than mine. I remember only a tiny handful of desperados. We were stopped almost immediately by the police, who seems, Mr. Speaker, who turned us back. But he nonetheless succeeded in forcing the government to perform, the then Labour government, I should stress, to perform a U-turn on the funding for community hospitals, and as a great pace bowler, or medium pace bowler, probably I should say, a great medium pace bowler, he bowled them middle stump, Mr. Speaker, and it's fitting that today he is proposing the gracious speech for a government that is delivering the biggest NHS catch-up programme in history, and far from closing hospitals, building new hospitals, Mr. Speaker. 48 of them, in fact. So we have the best health service in the world. I know, by the way, that he has experience of healthcare in a less fortunate country. He was lying in bed with a fractured rib after a skiing accident in Chamonix, when 3 men in white coats arrived claiming that they were there to perform the operation. And on closer inspection, they turned out to be the members for Halton, Price and Howden, the member for Sutton Coldfield, and my honourable friend, my noble friend, Lord Lancaster. At which point it is said that my honourable friend levitated miraculously from his bed and made his escape. His speech was in the finest traditions of this House. I was delighted that the motion was seconded by my honourable friend, the member for Brecon and Radnorshire. Some more seasoned members will remember the 14 years of service rendered to the people of Cardiff North by her father Gwilym, who joins us, I'm told, in the gallery today. Delighted to see him there, and I'm sure he'll be filled with admiration at the speech just delivered by his daughter. I also know the Honourable Lady sadly lost her mother earlier this year, and I have no doubt that she too will be simply bursting with pride as she looks down on us today. Because while the Honourable Lady may only have been an MP for a few short years, she has already established herself as a fantastic campaigner, including, actually, she said herself, changing the law to ban cyber flashing, saving Brecon Barracks, and with the Queen's Dragoon Guards, securing the return of a permanent Welsh regiment in Wales. Nor was she prepared to remain silent while the Leader of the Opposition's colleagues in Cardiff tried to keep Wales in perpetual lockdown. She is a tireless advocate for Welsh veterans and the armed services generally, an issue that is personal as well as political for her. And as a fellow enthusiast for dogs at polling stations. I was delighted to see her take Nancy the Labrador to the polling stations on Thursday. Nancy is, of course, named in honour of Nancy Astor, a great Conservative woman who certainly left a mark on this place and this country, and whose influence and achievements I am quite sure the Honourable Lady will emulate in the long and successful career that clearly awaits her. It was a pleasure to hear from her, and I thank her for seconding the motion. Mr. Speaker, on Sunday I spoke to my G7 counterparts together with President Zelensky, urging our international partners to join us in going further and faster in supporting Ukraine. And I'm sure the whole House will share my sorrow and revulsion at events in Mariupol in eastern Ukraine, which has endured weeks of merciless Russian bombardment and some of the worst atrocities of the war. At the same time, I'm pleased to report that our brave Ukrainian friends are succeeding in repelling the Russian assault on Kharkiv, defending their second city with the same fortitude that saw off Putin's attack on their capital. We should be proud that when their very survival, the survival of great European democracy, was imperilled, our United Kingdom has led the way, providing Ukraine with the weapons to defend itself and helping the world to impose the toughest economic sanctions on Putin. As I walked through the streets of Kiev last month, I saw firsthand the wholehearted support, what the wholehearted support of this House and this country has meant to the brave people of Ukraine. So let the message ring out from this chamber today. We will persevere in our support for the Ukrainians until Putin has failed and Ukraine has won. Mr. Speaker, during the pandemic, this government worked night and day at extraordinary speed to protect lives and livelihoods across our whole United Kingdom, whether by injecting £400 billion of direct support for the economy and supporting jobs through our world-leading furlough scheme, becoming the first country in the world to administer an approved COVID vaccine, or by delivering the largest testing programme and the fastest vaccine booster campaign in Europe, all of which allowed us to retain one of the most open economies and societies across the continent, which we wouldn't have done, by the way, if you listened to my party office, with the fastest growth in the G7 last year. Now we will bring that same urgency, impatience and determination to deliver on our mission of getting our country back on track and easing the burdens on families and businesses across the land. That's why we've already committed £9.1 billion to assist with energy costs alone. We're giving back £150 to people in their council tax, cutting fuel duty, increasing the warm homes discount, creating increasing the warm homes discount, creating a tax cut for 30 million workers by raising the national insurance threshold, delivering the biggest ever increase in the national living wage, worth an extra £1,000 a year for those working full-time, Mr. Speaker. But however great our compassion and ingenuity, we cannot simply spend our way out of this problem. We need to grow out of this problem by creating hundreds of thousands of new high-wage, high-skill jobs across the country. And as I give way to the lady opposite, Mr. Speaker, I remind the House that there has never been a Labour government that left office with unemployment lower than when they came in.
Can I just say it's not normal we do give way, but obviously the Prime Minister has Sir Owen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for giving way. We've heard a lot of words, very rapidly delivered, but what we haven't heard yet is an apology to the pensioners that are choosing between heating and eating, an apology to the children that have gone hungry throughout school holidays, and an apology to the hundreds of thousands of family members of COVID victims that were lost during the pandemic.
Mr. Speaker, of course this government is doing absolutely all we can to help people during the pandemic, to help pensioners. And by the way, it was this government that introduced the triple lock for pensioners to protect them. This government that helps people with the cost of heating, the £9.1 billion that we're putting in, the holiday activities and food programme that we put in, Mr. Speaker, the extra billions that we're putting in to support local councils. But be in no doubt, this is what I think everybody in this country needs to understand. And what we are doing, Mr. Speaker, is making sure that we have a strong economy with high-wage, high-skilled jobs that will enable us to take this country forward. And that would simply not have been possible if she had listened to the advice of her front bench, who wanted to keep us in lockdown, Mr. Speaker. And we are going to... That's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. And it was worth giving way just to make that point, Mr. Speaker. And that's why we're going to continue with our levelling up and our regeneration bill, which will help to... No. Sit down. Which will help create these jobs wherever people live in communities across the whole of the United Kingdom. That is the objective of this Queen's speech, Mr. Speaker. It is all focused on driving growth and jobs. Our schools and higher education bills will ensure that people have the skills to do them, raising standards in our classrooms, implementing the lifetime skills guarantee so people can retrain and acquire new qualifications at any stage of their life. And our energy bill will power our new green industrial revolution, creating hundreds of thousands of new green jobs, taking forward this government's energy security strategy. And about time this country had one. With £22 billion, Mr. Speaker, they didn't want a single nuclear power station. Come on, be honest. Look at them. Great quivering jellies of indecision that they are, Mr. Speaker. Our £22 billion infrastructure bank supporting the transition to net zero, vast new green industries in which our United Kingdom will once again lead the world. Mr. Speaker, just as we got Brexit done, so with this Queen's speech we will finish the job of unleashing the benefits of Brexit, to grow our economy, to cut the cost of living, and by bringing the urgency and ambition to how we exercise our freedoms that we have regained. Our Brexit Freedoms Bill will enable us to amend or replace any inherited EU law with legislation in UK law that puts the interests of British business first and British families first. And so that is what we are going to do. We're going to seize the chance to make our United Kingdom the best regulated economy in the world. We're going to take forward those trade deals we've got with 70 different countries, worth over £800 billion a year, with specific legislation in this Queen's speech. I hope I'm not speaking too fast for the Honourable Opposite. For our new free trade agreements with Australia and New Zealand, and we're using our new freedoms to control our borders. With a new plan for immigration so we can fix our broken asylum system, tackle illegal immigration that undermines the legal immigration that we support. Crack down on the vile people smugglers. And I know that the Leader of the Opposition, or perhaps I should, in deference to his phrase, I should refer to him as the Leader of the Opposition of the moment, Mr. Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition of the moment. The Leader of the Opposition of the moment likes to oppose these plans, or he claims he opposes them, but it turns out that legislation to permit the offshoring of asylum seekers.
Order. Only one on the sorry, Prime Minister. Only one person can be on the feet at the same time. The Prime Minister is not giving way. Prime Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition of the moment purports to oppose these plans, claims to oppose these plans, but it turns out they were actually pioneered in 2004 by a Labour government. The Right Honourable Gentleman may have got Tony Blair to take part in his election campaign, but it's a shame he cannot get behind Tony Blair's policies, Mr. Speaker. During the pandemic, we marvelled at the courage and commitment of so many people, all the people working in our public services, from the extraordinary men and women in our NHS, risking their lives to save others, to those toiling to keep our country going, whether in schools or shops or on public transport. So it is right, Mr. Speaker, that this government is now investing more in our NHS than any other government in history, giving our NHS the funding it needs to help clear the COVID backlogs, and we will also make sure that every penny is well spent. So whether through pop-up clinics in our communities, more face-to-face GP appointments, or new cancer screening machines, we maximise the ability of our NHS to check and treat its patients. But, Mr. Speaker, when times are tough and families are facing such pressures, we must also cut the cost of government and cut the burdens that government places on taxpayers and on citizens. We can't have expensive delays in delivering passports and driving licences that see families stranded and unable to go on holiday, HGV drivers unable to transport goods around this country in the way that is so integral, so integral to the economy we need, and we're going to fix it. So let me send a very clear message from this House today. This government will not tackle the post-COVID manana culture. We will take whatever steps are necessary to deliver for the British people, because the British people are not prepared to wait, and we share their impatience. Mr. Speaker, we will get through the aftershocks of COVID just as we got through COVID, as I've told you, with every ounce of ingenuity and compassion and hard work. Not by irresponsible spending that merely treats the symptoms of rising prices while creating an ever bigger problem for tomorrow, but by urgently pressing on with our mission to create the high-wage, high-skilled jobs that will drive economic growth across the United Kingdom, the whole United Kingdom. That is the long-term sustainable solution to ease the burden on families and businesses. That is the way to get our country back on track after the pandemic, to unite and level up across our whole country exactly as we promised. That is what this Queen's speech delivers, and I commend it to the House.
The leader of the SNP, Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Duke of Rossi for coming to Parliament today and leading us in the state opening. And
Chamber clear quietly. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Duke of Rossi for coming to Parliament today, for leading us in the state opening with the address that we had, and to send the best wishes from everyone across the House, and certainly from our own benches, to the Queen on what is such a momentous year for her. We also need to reflect on those that we have sadly lost over the course of the last session of Parliament, and we think of James Brokenshire, we think of David Amos, and of course we think of Jack Dromey. Three outstanding but different parliamentarians, all who I think were a fine example to all of us of how to conduct ourselves in this place. Let me thank the member for Beverley and Holderness for his moving of the motion this afternoon, an erudite trapeze round his history in government, and I hope he's still got a lot to give. He's made it very clear that he was removed early from office by the Prime Minister, and perhaps he still has some days ahead of him. But I think it's important that he stressed that the unity that there is in this House on the topic of Ukraine, that we all stand together, Mr. Speaker, with our friends in Ukraine, and standing up for the warmonger, the war criminal that still resides in Moscow. He will face justice, and we will make sure that ultimately that the people of Ukraine prevail. But of course, I thought it was interesting that the honourable member told us that the recent difficulties that the Prime Minister has had with the Metropolitan Police, they are not new. He's had his collar felt in the past as well. And let me also thank the seconder of the motion from Brecon and Radnanshire. I think really what we had was a job application for government from the member, and I'm sure she'll have a long and fruitful career in front of her as a member of this House and a member of the governing party. Mr. Speaker, as much as I hate to rub salt into wounds, this Queen's speech has one very obvious backdrop that deserves mention, and that's the democratic drubbing the Prime Minister and his party got last Thursday. And I know that they might want to hide from that reality, but the message from people right across these islands was crystal clear. The people made clear that this is now a Prime Minister facing his final days in office and a Tory government that it's on its last legs. And I'm proud to say, Mr. Speaker, that Scotland sent the strongest message of all. Now, I understand this might be a wee bit uncomfortable listening for the opposite benches, but they need to hear it all the same, because they need to hear what Scottish democracy is telling them and has been telling them for years. Last Thursday, Mr. Speaker, saw the best ever result for pro-independence parties in the local elections. The Scottish National Party is the largest party in the largest number of councils, the greatest ever result in a local election in our party's interest. This is, Mr Speaker, the 11th election victory in a row for the SNP, and it's the 8th election in a row that the SNP has won under the leadership of Nicola Sturgeon. Mr Speaker, a party in government winning more votes than winning more seats. Can you imagine that, Prime Minister?
No, I can't.
So, that's what we did. What about the Conservatives? Down by 100,000 votes, and they lost 66 seats in Scotland. And the worst news for all of them is, after all of that, they've still kept their leader. So, democracy has spoken in Scotland. It's spoken before, and it will speak again and again. And all our democratic decisions are saying exactly the same thing. Scotland rejects this Westminster government, we reject the Tory party, and we are demanding the choice of an independent future. Because the Scottish people know the cost of living with Westminster. We know the price we pay with a Prime Minister and the price of being stuck with a Tory government we didn't vote for. And it's a price none of us in Scotland, not one of us, can afford to pay any longer, and at that I will give way.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for giving way, and I'd like to ask him a direct question. How does it feel that 8 years after Scotland so conclusively said no to separation, that the pro-independence parties are still getting the same proportion of votes as they achieved 8 years ago, despite everything that's been thrown at us, and despite, frankly, everything that we've thrown at ourselves? When will the right honourable gentleman admit that the game is up?
Well, I have to say, and I'm going to call him my honourable friend because I do enjoy his company, but I have to say to him that if the game is up, if the game is up for anybody or any party, then the game is up for the Tory party in Scotland, and the game is up for the Union. And I say to him that he needs to reflect on the fact that the SNP's won the last 11 elections, as I said. We went to the public and we asked for a mandate to have an independence referendum. Well, I hear from a sedentary position we didn't get one. I would ask honourable members opposite to reflect very carefully. Because when we consider the first-past-the-post elections, firstly, to the Scottish Parliament last year, we won 62 of the 73 seats. And there is, Mr Speaker, a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament. And we hear in the Queen's speech today about respecting democracy. Why are the Scottish Conservatives and those in London denying democracy for the people of Scotland? How many times, Mr Speaker, how many times do the people of Scotland have to elect the SNP into government? And Westminster says no. What price democracy? What price democracy, Mr Speaker, when this place ignores the sovereign right and the will of the Scottish people? And I will tell you this, that a day of reckoning will come for those that are seeking to frustrate the rights of Scots to have a referendum, because, Mr Speaker, that day will come. And that day will come, and not only will there be a referendum, but we will win that referendum, because, Mr Speaker, that is what democracy is about.
My right honourable friend, give way. Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Does he agree with me that the reason that this shower of corrupt criminal Conservatives are blocking Scotland's rights, Scotland's democratic and legal rights to have a democratic mandate over their own future, is because they know.
David Davis.
Mr Speaker, it is in breach of this House's regulations that somebody calls somebody else a criminal in this chamber. Corrupt.
It wasn't a particular member, as you know. What I will... Just a minute. I don't think I need any help. What I would say is we want moderate and tolerant language that doesn't bring this House or expect members outside to copy the behaviour. I want good behaviour and I want moderate language. I want people to think before they speak. Ian Blackford, no.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I agree with my honourable friend, and I'll come on to...
We don't want to get into this.
I will come on to these points in just a second, but let me say respectfully to the in particular to the member for West Aberdeenshire and from the member from Banff-and-Buchan. Because I think they know that a referendum will come. And let me take the warnings from the Speaker about behaviour in this House and how we should all reflect on our behaviour and how we all interact with each other. And that goes right across the House, and I say that to my friend from Edinburgh South sitting on the Labour front bench as well. That when we have that referendum, it's implicit on all of us that we engage constructively. And let's examine and, by all means, pull apart the arguments for and against Scottish independence. But let's treat the electorate with respect. And let's trust the electorate who have given the Scottish Government that mandate to have that referendum. Mr. Speaker, the most... You know, I hear what you did in 2014. The point is that the electorate are given a choice in election to elect a government, and a government that has a mandate for an independence referendum. And let's not forget that in 2014, we were explicitly told that if we stayed in the United Kingdom, that our rights as European citizens would be respected. And what did this House do to Scotland? This House took Scotland out of the European Union against its will. It is perfectly right, under those circumstances, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Scotland have got the right to revisit whether or not they wish to become independent. I'm going to make some progress. The most glaring omission in this Queen's speech is the complete lack of any immediate action to help people with the biggest inflationary crisis in 50 years. Democracy spoke last Thursday, but it's pretty evident that the government hasn't listened. And what we saw from the Prime Minister today, he certainly hasn't learned. Because, of course, people turned out last week to punish the Prime Minister for the scandal of Partygate. Let's not forget, the public know that this Prime Minister is the first, the only Prime Minister that has found to have broken his own laws in office and still sits here as Prime Minister. That should shame this House as it shames us. But the electorate also turned out to punish a Prime Minister and a Chancellor who have been so consumed by the crisis of Partygate that they've failed to lift a finger to fight the Tory-made cost of living crisis. Mr. Speaker, as the Bank of England confirmed last week, the occupants of number 10 and number 11 Downing Street have now led us to the brink of recession. As my friend, the member for Glasgow Central, has said, the very first line of the Queen's speech should have been a commitment to bring forward an emergency budget. Where is it? Where is it? Where's the emergency budget that we need? An emergency budget to tackle now the rising cost of energy, of fuel and of food.
On that point, would you Thank you. I'm grateful to him for giving way. Would he agree with me that it is remarkable that for a government that says it cares about the cost of living crisis, there was absolutely nothing new in this Queen's speech, for example, around a mass home insulation programme, which would be the cheapest, most effective, fastest way of getting our emissions down, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, tackling climate emissions as well, yet we've had nothing new in this Queen's speech on that at all.
My honourable friend is right. There is nothing in this Queen's speech to deal with the cost of living crisis, nothing to deal with home insulation. And, you know, in the Scottish Parliament, the cooperation, the collaboration between the SNP and the Greens is an example where two parties can come together to make sure that we prioritise the climate emergency, something really missing from this Queen's speech today. Mr. Speaker, Scottish Power have already called for urgent action. They have called for £1,000 bill discounts for 10 million families before energy bills rocket by another £900 this autumn. And yet, once again, nothing from the Prime Minister and the Chancellor in this Queen's speech. In fact, the Chancellor has already told us that this strategy to tackle the cost of living crisis is literally to sit in his hands because he thinks it would be silly to act. Silly to act at a time that people are facing tough decisions and whether to turn the heating off, whether they can afford to put food on the table. And the Chancellor thinks it's silly to act. That tells everything that we need to know about the humanity and the compassion of this Conservative government. And yet, just like the Spring Statement, nothing has come from this government. This Queen's speech represents one more missed opportunity. And I can give the Prime Minister some suggestions. He could have matched the Scottish child payment, which doubled in April and will increase to £25 per week per child by the end of this year. Positive action to help those most in need. It could have matched the increase in Scottish issued social security payments by 6%. It could have done what governments are supposed to do in emergency, help people through it. By any measure or meaning, this government fails on all counts. Mr Speaker, another gaping hole in this programme is when it comes to energy policy, as has already been raised. As my friend, the member for Kilmarnock and Loudon, has rightly said last month, the Prime Minister's energy strategy is nothing more than a contract, lacking any substance or ambition. The lack of ambition to drive growth and green investment and forge the path to net zero, not to mention an industrial strategy to back it up, fails this and future generations. That lack of ambition won't help investment in renewables, and it won't help a just transition, and it certainly won't help consumers now or in the long term. And as for us in Scotland, a country so rich in energy potential, it is fleecing us of our green present and future.
On that point,
I will happily go ahead.
Mr Speaker, I thank the right honourable member for giving way. His constituency and my constituency border the Comedy Firth, which has the Nig fabrication yard where many of the mightiest platforms, oil production platforms in the North Sea were constructed. Would it not be a positive suggestion to Her Majesty's Government that we should power ahead with building floating offshore wind structures in the Highlands of Scotland, and that would help the Prime Minister and it would help us in Scotland as well?
I'm very grateful for that intervention, and I agree 100% with what he said. In fact, he and I have been talking about that over the course of the recent months. There is fantastic potential for the Highlands, and not just for the Highlands, but for the whole of Scotland, to benefit from the industrial revolution that will come from the opportunities in green energy. And, Mr Speaker, we need to make sure that we learn from the lessons of the past, that we are able to capture that supply chain. And if we go back to the 1970s, Nig was a thriving industrial base, thousands of jobs in that community supporting the oil industry. And I know that my honourable friend, like I, wants to see the Highlands and Islands being a thriving area where there's an industrial future for us. But yes, absolutely, we need the UK Government to help us on that. And I look forward to, together with my honourable friend, having discussions with the Government and exactly how we take that forward. I can see the Secretary of State for Scotland nodding, so perhaps we can discuss that over the coming days. Since the start of this year alone, we know that the UK Government has profited by at least £1.7 billion from the revenues that have been brought in from North Sea oil. All that revenue from Scotland's resources, and still, this UK Government is refusing to match the Scottish Government's £500 million Just Transition Fund to help ease resilience on fossil fuels. And still, Mr Speaker, no commitment to carbon capture and storage in Scotland's North East. Not only is this with the Westminster Government harming our planet, they are holding Scotland back.
I am genuinely grateful for the right honourable gentleman for giving way, particularly on the Scottish cluster being so important to my constituency in Banff and Buchan. Would he agree that the UK Government has thus far committed £41 million to that project, but that wasn't what I wanted to intervene on. What I wanted to intervene on was his mention of the £500 million Just Transition Fund for the North East of Scotland. Could he do what his colleagues from Kilmarnock, Loudon and Aberdeen South haven't been able to do thus far, and describe in detail what is that £500 million going to be spent on in the North East of Scotland?
Well, let me just say to the honourable gentleman that we've been shortchanged on not getting carbon capture and storage in Scotland. Twice now we've been promised it was coming. And we all know in Scotland that getting carbon capture and storage in the North East of Scotland with the Acorn project is absolutely instrumental in getting to net zero by 2045. It's absolutely instrumental in making sure that Grangemouth has a green chemical future. And there can be no more dithering, there can be no more delay. And the Acorn project must be greenlit, and it must be greenlit now. Now, I'll say to the honourable member that yes, we will spell out exactly the plan for that £500 million transition fund. And I'll say to him, I'll say to the House now, that we will take our responsibilities on these benches, and together with my friend from Kilmarnock and Loudon and my friend from Aberdeen South, we will be speaking more on our future energy potential for Scotland, because we will accept our responsibilities to deliver that energy strategy, to deliver that industrial policy which is lacking from those on the government front bench. And of course,
bargain for more funding. They won't come.
Mr. Speaker, I've concentrated on what the legislation in this Queen's Speech fails to do in terms of tackling the cost of living crisis in our green future. But what the legislation in this Queen's Speech does propose to enact is every bit as harmful. Because at the heart of the session's programmes, there's a twin track that needs to be challenged: an attack on devolution, an attack on human rights law. As the Prime Minister gets increasingly vulnerable and desperate, it is probably no surprise that he's reached back for the policy that got him the job in the first place: Brexit. The Brexit Freedoms Bill to repeal EU retained law and the other Brexit legislation in his Queen's Speech represent a race to the bottom on standards. The very idea that Westminster will be able to strike down devolved legislators' retained EU laws is the latest and only the latest in a long line of Tory power. I mean, the Prime Minister shakes his head, but that's the reality. We've seen it over the course of the last few years. The Scottish Parliament have the right to retain EU law because we have the opportunity and the right to find our way back into the European Union. And we won't be denied the right to retain EU law, and we won't be denied the right to an independent future in Europe. And the same applies to our human rights laws. The proposal by this UK government to rip up the Human Rights Act is one more example of a government that is prepared to force through legislation that is not only immoral, but internationally illegal. The attack on human rights legislation is all the more concerning given the context of the continuing failure to respond compassionately and comprehensively to the ongoing Ukrainian refugee crisis, not to mention the anti-refugee bill that was passed in the previous session. The agenda of this Westminster government couldn't be clearer. A hostile environment to devolution, to human rights law and to refugees. And that agenda continues apace in the Queen's Speech.
On that point, will he give way?
I'll happily give way.
I'm grateful to him for giving way. Both the government's independent review of the Human Rights Act and the cross-party Joint Committee of Human Rights have found that there's no case, no evidence base for replacing the Human Rights Act with a British Bill of Rights. So does he agree with me that the only reason the government are trying to do this is because as long as the Human Rights Act is on the statute book, it's a serious threat to their project of diminishing the accountability of the executive?
Absolutely. My honourable and learned friend is absolutely correct, and the public should be very afraid as to what this government's doing and the consequences of that, and to our hard-fought and hard-won human rights that have been built up over many decades. Mr. Speaker, I will.
I think the right honourable gentleman would probably accept that I give a lot of credence to the human rights of British citizens. But the primary argument I've seen with respect to the modification of the Human Rights Act is giving the government the ability to deport criminals, foreign criminals, who are being released from prison. This is an important right of a government, and surely that's worth having, if nothing else.
Well, I'm afraid that is a fig leaf, Mr. Speaker, for exactly what is going on, which is the attack on the rights that have been so hard fought and won over the course of the last few decades. All of this is the cost of living with Westminster, and it's exactly, Mr. Speaker, why Scotland wants out. So just as this, I'm going to have to make progress. So just as this Queen's Speech seeks to, I hear Scotland doesn't want out. It doesn't want out.
I've not been watching.
Yeah, and I hope he rises to his feet at some point in the Queen's Speech debate and tries to defend it. Because what I'll say to the honourable gentleman and I'll say to the Prime Minister is, we've got the mandate for an independence referendum. If he doesn't think that we're going to win it, let's bring it on and have the referendum. And I'll tell you what, you'll soon find that Scotland will vote for independence. So just as this Queen's Speech seeks to entrench Brexit Britain, our Scottish Parliament will bring forward legislation to offer a very different future to our people. A positive and progressive future at the heart of Europe. And we're not seeking the Prime Minister's permission. The only permission that we need. We can see the Prime Minister just couldn't care less because he's sitting talking to his friends on the government front bench. That's the disdain. That's the disdain that we see for the people in Scotland from this government. They simply couldn't care less. So we're not seeking the Prime Minister's permission. The only permission we need, the only permission we will ever need, is the democratic permission of the Scottish people. And let's not forget that it's the people of Scotland who hold sovereignty. And they might want to listen to this, because let's not forget the legal opinion in the case of McCormick versus the Crown at the Court of Session in 1953, when Lord Cooper stated that the principle of the unlimited sovereignty of Parliament is a distinctly English principle that has no counterpart in Scottish constitution. It is, Mr. Speaker, unquestionably the right of those in Scotland to determine their own future. Those rights were enshrined in the claim of right that was so instrumental in delivering our devolved Parliament, and is the case today as we seek to exercise our rights in an independence referendum. Let me remind the words to the Prime Minister of Parnell, who used to sit on these very benches. No man has the right to fix the boundary of the march of a nation. No man has the right to say to his country, thus far shalt go and no further. Mr. Speaker, time and time again, the people of Scotland have spoken, and they want a choice. The choice to choose our own future. They spoke in the last Holyrood election, and they spoke again last Thursday. And the longer that Scottish democracy speaks, the louder it will get. If the Conservatives want to stand in the way, if they want to try and deny democracy, then they should well be warned. Democracy will sweep them away, just as their party was swept away last week.
I now come to the Father of the House, Sir Peter Bottomley.
Can I say to the Parliamentary Leader of the SNP, it's a delight